Hello, everyone, and welcome to our online literary event where I'm joined today by Tim Ewins. Tim, when he's not writing debut novels, maintaining a book Instagram account, working in finance, and having worked on the stand-up comedy scene, he's here talking to me. Tim, hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you? Yeah, good, thank you.
Good. I understand that you wrote your debut novel in an office. Is this the room where it happened?
No, I've actually changed jobs twice.
Close enough.
For the second one, this is the room where it happened.
Right, excellent. And so tell me the logistics of writing your first novel, We Are Animals, and how you did that in your office.
Um, so I work in finance, and I used to work at a place that had loads of meeting rooms up on the top floor, and I just wanted to do something creative. I've pretty much done something creative like throughout my life, and finance doesn't really allow for that. I started booking out meeting rooms just to see if I could write a book. And it turns out that an hour a day over 4 years, you can write a book.
And that's very interesting to see that you had to kind of condense it into that hour. Did you find that you could swap into the writing mode quickly?
Yeah, in a way. So obviously there were days when I found it more difficult. I guess that they were the days when I was at a part of the book or the part of the plot that I wasn't sure what was going to happen. But I did kind of find that for example, I'd go in, so when you hear people say they have a writer's block, for example, I get writer's block sometimes, but because I had just an hour, I'd go in and I'd just sort of type fast, and sometimes at the end, when I go back to work for the afternoon, and then on the bus home, I'd read through what I'd done and edit it. I did it all on an iPad, so sort of just carried it around with me and typed a bit on the bus. But I tended to edit what I'd done on the bus. It was very much a fit it around the rest of my life kind of.
That's incredible. I mean, your writer's block must have had to last a minute if it was going to be proportional to people who are writing full time. And so,
Sorry.
No. Okay.
I was just going to say that when I had there were obviously days when I'd just sit down and have lunch and you'd be like, I just can't do anything. There was definitely a couple of days, maybe a week, where I watched almost a series of Rick and Morty instead. And I was like, well, this is really not how I want it.
It's all about the balance. A big theme in your novel is, in We Are Animals, I'd love to hear more about the second novel soon, but in We Are Animals is the sense of escapism. And now, is that something you've always wanted to achieve in your writing, or is it something you think is tethered in some way to how you were literally escaping your day job?
I think it's probably just what I've always kind of looked at doing, kind of thing. So when at university, for example, I did performing arts, and I remember being told by our lecturer that they were trying to get out really depressing things from us and make it fairly bleak, and it's just never really been what I've enjoyed writing. So even then, I ended up doing the comedy parts of the plays, just because I just like when I go and see things and read stuff. I like stuff that's realistic, but I also like to be entertained. So I figured when I was writing, and also I prefer writing happy stuff, just because it's just a more enjoyable pastime for me.
It's very refreshing because I think it's a real skill to make people joyful from writing, and a hard thing to do. Were on the comedy scene for 8 years, if that's right. Tell me about that in general.
I started comedy a long time ago, and that was at university as well. And it was I used to do musical comedy. I used to play, so with a guitar, I used to play comedy songs, but I did it before I was doing stand-up. Went to an open mic night and sang a song about a skunk. And it wasn't really funny, it was just about it wasn't about anything, it's just about stuff.
Sounds great.
A guy that did comedy nights came up and asked if I wanted to try and do a stand-up show, and I just said yes, because you do when you're at uni, don't you sort of say yes to everything. And then went to this comedy night, played just songs, didn't realise I had to talk in between because I never really watched stand-up comedy. And then, because it didn't go badly, but no one, like, it wasn't a stand-up set, it was just in the wrong place. And that made me want to try and see if I could do it. And then I wrote bits around the songs, and then I sort of just carried on for 8 years.
That's amazing. And where was that you were at uni and doing that?
So that was at Leicester. So I started doing the comedy at Leicester, and then after I'd finished uni, sort of gigged around the Midlands mainly because my car wasn't very good, so I couldn't go that far. And then moved to London for a while. Did a lot of comedy in London. The thing is I found when I was in London is that there's so many comedy nights and so many open mic nights, so you could gig every night, and then you realise that that's all you're doing. And we've gotten to see your wife and that kind of stuff.
Those things, you know.
Yeah, the other stuff you should do. But yeah, it was good. I used to love doing comedy, and I have done the odd occasional gig since I've stopped, just for like fun.
And how does writing funny books compare to writing comedy sets? I suppose in both cases, you don't get to see how your audience is going to react. I suppose in comedy it's slightly more intense because they're reacting live. How do you do those two? So
when I was doing stand-up, if you've written a joke and it's not a good joke, I know straight away. So I'd say it, and then if it didn't get a laugh, I'm like, I'm never repeating that again because I don't want to live this again. But equally, I know the jokes that I'd done in the past that would work. So if I did do a bad joke, I could just pull out another one that I knew was okay. And with a book, I found it really odd because as I was writing, to be honest, when I started to be around once, it's been called a comic novel quite a lot, and it is what it is. I never would set out to write that. I wasn't trying to be funny necessarily, but when no one reads it, so I wrote the first maybe few chapters, and then I was like, I don't know if this is good or bad, so I gave it to a few people, and even then I've got to wait a couple of months until they bother to read it, and even then a lot of them won't. And actually, the first couple of chapters I wrote, one of them now isn't in the book, but I sent it to my mum, my then girlfriend, who is now my wife, a few other people, and most people really liked it. And my mum just was like, no, I just don't like it at all, just didn't get it. Which is fair enough, she was just being honest. So that kind of makes, it's weird to not get the response. Even then, after other people had read it, and then when it was actually published and went out and other people who I'd never met read it, that was terrifying. And then you have to sort of wait for Amazon reviews to find out what people think.
Yeah, and by that stage you can't change it to a new joke either, so it makes it a little more well.
But they don't go through it quite. So an Amazon review, like, this, however many pages it is I enjoyed it or I didn't enjoy it. It's not like this line wasn't quite on point, which with stand-up it really is. If you do a couple of lines and you've sort of lost everyone, if you do a minute or so that's not great, people are bored. So it's a very different thing. Yeah.
Right, and your bios mention a brief stint in acting. How brief was the stint? Were you an extra in something? Is that it?
Yeah. You could argue I went to uni and did performing arts, but I wouldn't say I did loads of acting there. I got more into the right. And then just a mate of mine he worked as an AD for lots of films for a while, and I was living with him, so every now and again I went and did some extra work just if I didn't have anything to do. So I'm in the film Bronson. There's a scene where Bronson has a fight with someone. To be honest, I've not even watched the end of the film, and I quite liked it. I just didn't finish it. There's a scene where I think he's out of prison. I think he wheezes on someone, and I'm in the background shouting something. But I won't shout here because it's quite rude. But you can just about hear my voice saying, pee on him, essentially.
Amazing. Claim to fame, other than the book, you know.
But when that was when that was happening, I did sit next to Superhands from Peep Show, and that was pretty cool. Having the makeup done, I was like, yeah, this is cool. He didn't say anything, and neither did I, but I did just like look at him.
That's great. And so, Tim, I first came across your book and you on Instagram, actually, where on your Bookstagram rather, where you write book reviews. Do you want to explain why I've used air quotes there for the audience?
Yeah, my book reviews aren't really reviews. I started because I wanted to get book recommendations from other people, and I wasn't that interested in posting what I was reading.
Right.
So I posted a couple of things. I think I posted something. One of the first ones was about it was a kid's book. It's not my son's book. It was the Hungry Caterpillar, and I made a joke about it being like an adventure horror film book where the caterpillar gets attacked by a cocoon and then a butterfly venges the caterpillar or something like that. And then I just thought I'd carry on doing that because it made me happy. And then, so now I get books and just write things that aren't true about them, essentially. That's a bit funny.
Yeah. I love it. They're all so great and so tongue in cheek, and it's clearly from your history in comedy and a really good use of titles to get some literal meaning across. Do you feel you've delved into the Bookstagram world? That's because it's quite an intense space, isn't it?
It's weird. I don't use Instagram for anything else. I've got a personal account which I never go on pretty much. But yeah, it's a strange place. I really like it. It's full of people just sort of saying what they're reading and recommending books to other people. And I'm not actually a fast reader, so I wanted to like I said, I went on there and I found people just to kind of keep up to date with what was coming out. But quite often, so people that have followed me that actually read, because there's a lot of people following people that don't read it, but the people that actually read it, when I comment on their post saying, this is a like to be read list, or I wasn't so, just opinions of books. So I've had a few people be like, well, that wasn't very funny. I was like, no, I know, but I actually quite like books. But yeah, I really like it. It is an intense place, but it is everyone that I've come across there is really friendly. And because it's just about books, it's quite nice, yeah.
In arguably one of the most innovative book promos I've ever seen, you were recording yourself reading extracts on your story on Instagram of your book every day in different characters and voices. I'd love for you to please read an extract for the audience today. I did warn you that I was going to make you do it in the style of Whitney Houston, but actually you're allowed to do it in any of the personas that you adopted, just not yourself.
Okay, I don't mind doing Whitney Houston. When I was doing anything that anyone suggested. So yeah,
Brilliant.
I haven't actually picked a bit because when I was doing them, I just sort of did them because then I didn't practice or anything, and you can definitely tell when you look at them. So if I just pick chapter called Cat. Jan's father stood in the arouse waiting room, holding a cold battered fish with some soggy chips in a wet newspaper. He'd been standing there for an hour.
Brilliant. Thank you. I wonder if the Zoom recording's going to get those high notes just right. I hope it does. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about that whole process that you were doing and having to do kind of promo for your book during lockdown, which I'm sure you weren't expecting to be the case.
Yeah, it was a weird time to bring out a book because I think it came out the very beginning of March, so lockdown happened maybe 2 or 3 weeks later. And to be honest, it wasn't particularly planned. I think what happened was another author called Hannah Sword, who wrote The Codes of Love. There was something on Twitter where people were tagging each other to just do a reading from their book. So she tagged me to do a reading, so I did a reading. And then I asked another author, so can you do a reading from your book, but in the style of Eminem? And they didn't do it. And I thought, well, I can do that, that's fine. And when I said I can do that, again, not well, that wasn't, none of the impressions are particularly good. But yeah, then every night I just decided to upload. So I ended up going to Twitter in the end for some reason, rather than Instagram. But I did start on Instagram. And then every night of lockdown, about 8 o'clock, I recorded about a minute or 2 minutes of me reading from the book in the style of someone else. And then if people gave me requests, then I'd do them. And I remember being a bit confused when lockdown eased, because I wasn't really sure how I could ease doing that.
It's a bit too much to try and give a diluted version. It's all or nothing, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think there are a couple with that my son were involved in because he's a 2-year-old, and it wasn't really an option for him not to be involved in them sometimes because he was
singing.
He loved them, actually. I did one being Gandalf, and I just read it sort of putting my hand out and saying "You shall not pass" in his voice, but however, like whatever the words were, and he was just running around the table giggling and stuff. And I think that one was probably one of the more popular ones, and it was definitely because of him.
What were some of the other requests that you got?
I got those. I did Jamie Oliver, which I quite liked. I had a few that I'd never heard of. So someone asked me to do Lemony Snicket. I think I didn't really know who that was. So then, and quite often I had requests of people I didn't know, and then I'd go into this sort of YouTube hole, just watching lots of different things, and then coming up with a terrible impression that would be the same had I not have watched them. And who are some of the others? I enjoyed doing Hagrid. That was cool. Mm-hmm. I did one of Matt Lucas, and he liked it. That was pretty cool.
Oh, that is cool.
Nice little. That felt good in the morning when I saw that he liked it. Yeah. It was fun. It was just something to do during lockdown. To be honest, I don't know if it affected it. If it got people to buy the book, but it was fun.
Yeah, and it was fun to watch too. So the book was published by Lightning Books digital imprint. Is that right? And so do you think that maybe the lockdown period might have helped that it wasn't a hardback? I think selling hardbacks, probably quite hard during the time.
Yeah, I think I probably wasn't as unlucky as some of the other authors that had release dates around then, because it was just on ebook. I don't, because it was my first book. I've got nothing really to compare it to. But I know what you mean. There wasn't like a box or several boxes of prints that just weren't going anywhere, which probably, in retrospect, was a good thing. Obviously, would have been nice to see it.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's still a chance. So the idea, what they were doing, and what they still are doing, is go to digital first, and then based on lots of things, the idea is to then go to print. And their reasoning for it is, so for example, We're Animals, I said at the beginning, it's not. I never started writing a comic novel, so it's not necessarily an obvious genre. I don't think. And they said basically there's a lot of books that they've enjoyed that don't have an obvious genre, and when you print them, bookshops don't know where to put them, so they don't put in the orders. So they wanted to put them on ebook first to show that they're popular, and then print them when they can kind of prove it, to try and send them out better, I think was the plan. And everything that's happened with lockdown now, I don't really know if that's still the plan. It might still be. But yeah, no, I think it probably wasn't such a bad thing that it's on ebook. Yeah.
And so tell me about how you chose that stream of publishing, that kind of journey from the office to that point. What happened in between?
Do you mean like how I found a publisher?
Yeah.
Okay, so I sent it out to loads and loads of publishers. Same as a lot of authors, I think. I got a fair amount of rejection, and it was always fairly nice. The ones that weren't just templates said we liked it, but sort of from what I can gather, and I might be wrong here, but I don't. From what I could gather, comic novels, which apparently it is apparently they're not as easy to place and I think and to sell. So I got quite a lot of that kind of feedback. And then the guy who owns I Like Books, Dan, he called. He basically rang me and said that's why he wanted to do ebook, but he really liked it, and yeah, I went with them. Working with them has been ridiculously nice and good. It's like a proper. I guess before I managed to find a publisher, I kind of you sort of see publishers and agents as people that you will never be able to talk to, and aren't really people. And then since I've worked with them, it's all the editors and cover design. Everyone's really nice. It's just much more friendly than I realised it would be. Not that I thought it wouldn't be. I don't know. It's just been a really nice process. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds much more relaxing than how I probably picture it the same way as you're picturing it before you went in. Is your second book published with them as well?
But yes, yeah.
And when's it coming out, and what's it about, and all those nice questions?
I don't know. It doesn't have a date, and I don't. But next year, at some point. Basically, it's I'm doing a lot of edits at the moment, which I intend to have finished by the end of this year, and then there might be more edits, and then the cover and stuff. Basically, I guess when it's completely ready, but the plan is to have it out next year, and then the plan is to then have another one out every year for the next 3 after that, which is cool.
That is so cool. And so what's the one you're working on now about or called? Do you have a name yet?
I have a working title, which is The Tiny Pieces of Enid.
Right.
And it's about... So it does have humour in it, but it's a different genre, really. It's about an old lady who is based on my nan, who has dementia, goes to a home for dementia, specifically for dementia, and then her husband has a fall. He can't afford to go to the same home, and it doesn't cater for him, so he goes to a different home, and it's sort of about Enid leaving and trying to find the person she's been married to all her life. So it's probably got a heavier theme than it than the first. It's also, there are definite similarities. So We're Animals, as you know, has got loads of animals all the way through it, and the new book has lots of different birds all the way through it in a similar kind of way, sort of reflecting the characters and just doing what birds do.
Yeah. Well, it is so fascinating to hear you say that you kind of didn't write it to be, that it keeps being called a comedy despite the fact that you're not having written it to necessarily be one, because I do think that it kind of reads like literary fiction, which is also funny, rather than, I don't think you're explicitly telling jokes so much as just being quite funny. And that juxtaposition between the animals and the humans in your story is one of my favorites, because for the audience, a little context is that the chapters kind of alternate between humans doing their thing, a man called Jan on his gap year, and into his older life, and also chapters with animals kind of mirroring Jan's behavior. And Tim, I'd like to know whether that juxtaposition was something, were you trying to reflect human behavior in an animalistic way, in a pattern?
Yeah, I was.
Right.
I was. But so, for example, when I said earlier that the first time I did a comedy song somewhere, it was about a skunk.
Yeah.
A lot of my comedy sets, so there was a song about a cow, and there's a cow that is all the way through Real Animals. And I wouldn't say I mean to, but I tend to put animals in everything that I've done. I couldn't even tell you why. But when I started writing Real Animals, so when I was writing it, it wasn't heavily plotted out. But it also wasn't pantsed. It was kind of, I had a structure that I could sort of work around. And then I put the cow in at the beginning, and then I just sort of found myself writing more about animals, partly because whenever I was writing anything, I have to research it, and researching about animals I find really interesting. So if I was writing about boar, for example, I was like, well, I don't actually know what boars do in a particular place in Poland, so I was like, oh, let's find out. And the fact that they're mirroring the people, it kind of just grew when I was writing it. Well, I didn't start trying to do it, but I think it's in chapter 3 or 4. The cow starts dancing to a DJ on the beach, and then I realised that's the point. I was like, well, that's actually kind of like what I'm doing with Jan. At that point, I was like, well, let's try and make a thing of that, because that sounds quite fun.
Absolutely. Will you tell us more as well about, so Tim describes, categorizes humans in a similar way that you might classify animals in an animal kingdom. So there's vests and moustaches. And Tim, will you tell us a bit about those two categories of human and why you're interested in writing about them?
Yeah, so a vest is someone who's on their gap year. In the book, they quite literally wear a neon vest. And they've gone on the gap year and they go to a beach and they're convinced they found themselves and it's life-changing, but then they go home and get a job and live a life like we all do. And then a mustache is someone that's Jan, the character. He has got kind of old, stuck in his ways. It just so happens that Jan has travelled all of his life, but a mustache is normally someone who would, doesn't like, it's set in their ways, doesn't like anything new happening, doesn't like change. It's to be honest, it's kind of just a cynical view of two different ages, but it's not meant as a cynical view. So as the book goes on, they kind of, a mustache is a good thing and a vest is a good thing. It's just different stages in their life, and they kind of clash when they meet each other, and then they get to know each other a bit, and it's just two different people being themselves. I think I would say, I've been both of them, and I think most people probably will be at some point. I came up with the idea when we were travelling, and there was someone, essentially a vest. It was the second time I've been travelling, and I think he started telling me about his blog, and he was a nice guy, but I just remember thinking, like, there's definitely a character in there.
Yeah, we're telling you about his blog with a vodka Red Bull bucket in the other hand.
yeah, exactly that. But I also had a vodka Red Bull bucket. I'm not.
They're delicious.
Yeah, and that's exactly. Yeah, it's just different types of travellers, I guess, that don't tend to do it together. The first time I went travelling, when I was definitely a vest. I remember meeting someone who was, and actually Jan was largely based on this guy, and I think you'll realise when I say it, because I think he even says a line that is what this bloke said to me once. We were in Malaysia and we were looking at the beach, and he was basically saying how it's all gone wrong, and he hates all these tourists going in, and it's not what it used to be. And I said to him, like, why don't you go somewhere else? Not in a nasty way, but like, if I hated a place now, I'd probably go somewhere else. And he was like, no, I'm not leaving, because I've been here how long, and there's nowhere better than this. Yeah. So they're kind of based on people I met traveling, but also very much myself and my friends.
Yeah, I think what's really important about how you do it is it seems like a judgment in the beginning, but as you go through the book, you realize it's actually just commentary, and yeah, it's not a judgment.
I'm glad that came across because I was worried at the beginning.
No. Especially because I don't think it's even possible, even if you're a vest yourself, to go to a kind of a beach somewhere that's not home and think that you're much better than all the other people doing the exact same thing. It's just how we behave, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. So that is all the questions I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining us here, and thank you to the audience for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I enjoyed doing it. Like, review, subscribe to our channels, and then you'll know when the next one's coming. Thanks so much, Tim, and I'm very excited to read the next book. Write me down for someone who wants to get a copy.
Thank you very much for having me on. It's excellent.